White Lies, Black Truths. Chapter 1. The Rules They Told Me to Follow. From the moment I could walk, there were rules, unspoken and unbroken. Don't speak too loud. Don't run in the store. Don't wear your hoodie up at night. Mama didn't call them survival skills. She just called them manners. But I knew better. They weren't meant for everyone. Just for boys who looked like me. I remember the first time I asked why I had to take my hands out of my pockets at the gas station. Mama didn't answer. She just gave me that look, the one that said, "You'll understand one day." I think I understood sooner than she thought. There was this time at the corner store. I was maybe 7. I was looking at candy. Didn't even touch anything yet. The clerk kept following me with her eyes. Her mouth smiled, but her eyes didn't. When we left, Mama squeezed my hand harder than usual. "See?" she whispered. "It starts early." At school, I learned a different set of rules. Raise your hand, but not too high. Be smart, but not too proud. Win, but don't celebrate. Lose, but never cry. I watched how other kids walked through the halls like they owned the place. I walked like I didn't want to bump into anything. Even my friends had rules. Don't talk back to cops. Don't wear red in the wrong part of town. Don't run at night. Don't walk too slow either. Keep your ID visible. Keep your anger invisible. These weren't rules written anywhere, but we all knew them, like a second language we didn't remember learning, like breathing, but with fear instead of air. Sometimes I wondered what it would feel like to forget the rules, to just exist. Walk into a store without being watched. Laugh loud without someone flinching. Wear a hoodie in the rain and not feel like I was asking for trouble. But forgetting the rules? That wasn't safe. Remembering them, living by them, was the price of staying whole. And even then, wholeness was never guaranteed. Chapter 2. Why my skin wasn't in their history books. In class, we learnt about presidents and pilgrims, revolutions and railroads, but no one looked like me. My hand shot up. "What about the marches?" I asked. The teacher smiled tight and turned the page. That day, I stayed after class. "Miss Simmons," I said, "was Dr. King in our textbook?" She paused. "He's in the back, in the civil rights section, but we won't get to that this year." "But we're almost at the end of the book," I said. She sighed. "We're on a schedule." So I flipped to the back myself. 2 pages, that was it. 2 pages for hundreds of years of struggle, courage and change. No mention of Malcolm, of Fannie Lou Hamer, of Tulsa, of redlining. 2 pages. I asked my ma that night. She handed me her own book, tattered and full of notes in the margins. "What they don't teach," she said. "You still need to know." At school I started reading more. Online, in the library, wherever I could. I found stories about resistance, resilience, rebellion. I found people who looked like me doing more than surviving. They were building, leading, demanding. One day, I brought a book of poems by Black writers to school and read one aloud for a project. A few classmates clapped. A few rolled their eyes. One whispered, "Why's it always got to be about race?" I looked at her and said, "Because history didn't forget me. It just got erased." After that, I started writing my own. If they weren't going to tell my story, I would. In class, we learned about presidents and pilgrims, revolutions and railroads, but no one looked like me. My hand shot up. "What about the marches?" I asked. The teacher smiled tight and turned the page. Chapter 3: Smiling Faces, Hidden Fences. Our neighbors waved when they mowed the lawn, sent cupcakes during holidays. But when I biked past their driveway at night, their porch light flicked on. Every time. They smiled, but I saw the fence they kept just under their eyes. The Johnsons next door always greeted us with cookies at Christmas. Mr. Latham lent Pa his ladder once. We were good neighbors. That's what they called us. But never friends. Not really. When I got my first bike, I rode up and down our street like it was my personal racetrack, but I always slowed near their driveway, not because they told me to, but because I could feel the energy change, like a dog sensing a storm. I remember the day their grandkids came to visit. I waved at the little boy. He didn't wave back, just stared. Later, I heard him ask his grandma why that boy was so dark. She shushed him, but I heard her answer too. "Some people are just different, sweetie." Different, that word. It stuck like burrs on my socks. In school, we were taught about equality, about how times had changed. But I started noticing things, like how no one ever invited me inside their homes, how birthday parties happened across the street, and I never got the invite, even though I brought the biggest smile to school. One day, I dropped a glove near their mailbox. When I bent to pick it up, Mrs. Johnson opened her door, startled. She smiled, but didn't come out. Just waited until I was back on the sidewalk. It wasn't hate, it wasn't shouting, it wasn't slurs. It was distance, designed, polite, perfect. A fence made of looks, of pauses, of lowered voices. It's strange how someone can hand you a plate of cookies and still keep the gate locked tight. Smiling faces, hidden fences. And somehow, I was always the one expected to wave first. Or neighbors waved when they mowed the lawn, sent cupcakes during holidays, but when I biked past their driveway at night, their porch light flicked on. Every time. They smiled, but I saw the fence they kept just under their eyes. Chapter 4: The Bus Seat That Wasn't Mine. There was always one seat left, right near the front. I reached for it, but a boy shifted and said, "This one's taken. No backpack, no friend, just taken." So I walked to the back, like Ma warned me. Better to sit down in silence than get pushed down in front of everyone. I remember that morning clearly. It was raining, my backpack was soaked, and my shoes squeaked every time I moved. I was late getting to the bus stop and just barely made it as the doors hissed shut behind me. The front seat was open. I saw it. Everyone saw it. The boy who blocked it didn't even look at me, just angled his body and set his lunchbox on the edge, like it had a right to be there more than I did. The bus driver didn't say anything, just watched me in the mirror. So I walked. Every row felt heavier than the last. Eyes darted up and then away. I made it to the back, slid into the final seat, the one near the wheel well that made your knees knock together every time we hit a bump. That seat became mine. Not officially, but it belonged to me the way leftovers belong to the last person to reach the table. After a few weeks, I stopped trying. I just went straight to the back, headphones in, head down. But one day I had enough. I sat in the front before anyone else could get on. The same boy looked at me when he got on, but this time I didn't move. The bus was quiet the whole ride. When I got off, the driver said, "You all right, kid?" I didn't answer, just nodded. Because sometimes claiming a seat is louder than any words you'll ever speak. There was always one seat left, right near the front. I reached for it, but a boy shifted and said, "This one's taken." No backpack, no friend, just taken. So I walked to the back, like Ma warned me. Better to sit down in silence than get pushed down in front of everyone. Chapter 5. Ma's warnings by the window. Ma always stood by the window when I went out, watching, waiting. Her coffee untouched, her eyes tracing every step I took to the corner store, like she was memorizing the last time she might see me walk. It didn't matter where I was going, school, the barber shop, to Marcus' place down the block. Ma watched like the world was full of things waiting to snatch me up. And maybe it was. Sometimes she stood there so long the coffee would go cold. She didn't blink much, just stared, one hand curled around the curtain, the other clutching the chipped mug like a charm. If I turned around, I could feel her eyes still on me. Once I asked her why she did it. "You think I don't trust you?" She shook her head. "I trust you, baby. It's the world I don't." There was a time I took the long way home, just to clear my head. She was pacing the porch when I got back. Her voice cracked like she'd been holding her breath the whole time. "You can't just disappear," she said. "Not you. Not now." At first, I thought it was just overprotection, but the older I got, the more I saw. The way sirens made her flinch, how she froze when she saw flashing lights out the window, the way she checked her phone every 10 minutes when I was late. That window was her shield, her battleground, her confessional. And every time I left the house, I left a piece of her behind it, hoping, praying, watching. One day, I caught her whispering as I walked off, "Come back whole." Ma always stood by the window when I went out, watching, waiting. Her coffee untouched, her eyes tracing every step I took to the corner store, like she was memorizing the last time she might see me walk. Chapter 6. A knock that shook the house. It was just after 10 p.m., a hard knock, loud, angry. My heart raced. Pa stood still. "Stay upstairs," he said. Mama's voice was flat. "Don't open it." We didn't sleep that night, not really. That knock stayed like thunder in the walls. I was halfway through brushing my teeth when I heard it. 3 knocks, sharp and spaced, like someone wanted to make sure we knew they were serious. I froze, the toothbrush still in my mouth. The sound echoed through the hallway. Pa was already downstairs, standing by the door but not near enough to reach the handle. Mama was behind him, her robe wrapped tight around her. She motioned for me to go back to my room, but I crept halfway down the stairs anyway, my heart hammering in my ears. The knock came again. "Who is it?" Pa called. No answer. Mama picked up the phone, but didn't dial, just held it like a weapon, her finger poised above the 9. When nothing else came, Pa stepped to the window and peeled back the curtain just enough to peek. A car, unmarked, engine running, no one on the porch, just red taillights glowing like eyes in the dark. He didn't open the door. "Go to bed," he finally said, voice low. "It's over." But it wasn't. Not really. We didn't sleep. We just laid still, each in separate rooms, connected by fear. I listened to the floorboards creak as Pa paced. I heard Mama praying, soft and low. In the morning, the car was gone, but the feeling stayed. That knock wasn't just on our door. It was on our safety, our silence, our right to exist in peace. And it reminded us, even behind locked doors, we were never really safe from the world outside. It was just after 10 p.m., a hard knock, loud, angry. My heart raced. Pa stood still. "Stay upstairs," he said. Mama's voice was flat. "Don't open it." We didn't sleep that night, not really. That knock stayed like thunder in the walls. Chapter 7. Lessons They Didn't Teach in School. Uncle Ray wasn't in any textbook, but he was my favorite teacher. He had a voice like gravel and eyes that had seen too much. He came over most Sundays, with a newspaper under one arm and a world of wisdom under the other. He'd start with small talk, sports, the weather, neighborhood gossip, but always ended up teaching me something that couldn't be graded. "Come outside," he'd say. "Let me show you something." We'd sit on the porch, watching people pass by. "See that car?" He'd nod toward a black and white cruising too slow. "That's a badge pretending not to look, but it is." He taught me how to make eye contact without looking threatening, how to speak firm without sounding angry, how to record a moment without trembling hands. "Hold the phone low," he said, "but don't ever hide it. You hide it, they say it's a weapon." One day, he placed a folded bill in my palm. "Keep this under your soul," he said, "just in case they leave you somewhere far with no way back." He wasn't paranoid, he was prepared. That's what he said. Prepared is what you are when the system doesn't see your safety as its job. He showed me how to iron a shirt so I'd be taken seriously, how to speak to a teacher who thought my silence meant ignorance, how to keep calm when someone called me boy. None of this was in school, but it was the only education that ever made me feel ready for the test I never signed up for. Uncle Ray didn't grade me. He armed me with truth, with memory, with quiet armor. And every time I walk out the door, I carry his lessons like a second skin. Chapter 8. The lunch table line. There was an invisible line in the cafeteria. They said it wasn't assigned, but somehow every table told a story, and mine was always near the end. When I sat at theirs, the conversation paused, like I'd brought something contagious. It started freshman year, first week. I didn't know anybody yet, and I was still figuring out where I fit. The lunchroom was loud, full of energy and routine I hadn't been clued into. I picked a table toward the center, one where a few of my classmates sat, laughing about something that happened in gym. I slid into an empty spot and offered a smile. The laughter stopped. They didn't glare, they didn't say anything cruel, but one by one, their bodies shifted away, like I'd upset the arrangement of things without realizing it. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but the next day when I tried again, the same thing happened. Different group, same silence. So, I sat near the back, with the other kids who didn't quite fit into the loud cliques or the polished friend groups. We formed our own table, a mix of names and colors and stories. We didn't match, but we didn't mind. Still, I'd watch the center table sometimes, watch how freely they laughed, how they spoke without measuring their words, how they never had to wonder if their presence was too much. One day, I asked a teacher if we could mix things up. Maybe we could rotate tables every week, I suggested. She smiled politely. That's a nice idea, but students tend to sit where they feel comfortable. I wanted to ask, comfortable for who? Because that line in the lunchroom wasn't drawn in chalk. It was drawn in history, in assumptions, in the way certain kids always filled the middle while the rest of us circled the edge. It was just lunch, but every meal taught me who the room was built for, and who was just borrowing a chair. Chapter 9. What I wrote on the bathroom mirror. It was third period, just after math. I told my teacher I needed the bathroom pass, and I walked slower than usual, not because I was tired, but because I needed time to breathe. That day had been full of little cuts, the kind people don't notice unless they're bleeding from them. Someone had laughed at my name when the sub-read rolled. Another kid mimicked my voice behind my back, and when I raised my hand to answer a question, the teacher called on someone else, twice. The bathroom was empty when I walked in. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like they were annoyed too. I stared at the fogged-up mirror, pulled a black marker from my hoodie pocket, and uncapped it slowly like it was something sacred. I wrote, "Do you see me now?" The words smeared slightly where the mirror was still damp, but they stuck. I stared at them, my reflection caught between the letters. It wasn't vandalism, it was truth. It was a question I'd been asking for years, just not out loud. I didn't wait to see if someone would come in. I left the marker on the edge of the sink and walked back to class. The next day, the words were still there. A little faded, but still visible. By lunch, someone had drawn a line through it. By the following morning, it was wiped clean. No note, no conversation, just erased. But something strange happened. People started looking at me longer. Not mean, not kind, just longer. Like maybe they were trying to figure out what they hadn't seen before. No one asked if it was me, but someone added something in small blue pen near the corner of the mirror a few days later. Just 3 words. "We see you." And that was enough to keep me writing, even if it wasn't on mirrors anymore. Chapter 10. The day the teacher looked away. It was supposed to be a normal Thursday. We had group projects in English class, and I was paired with 3 other students, 2 who barely acknowledged me, and 1 who acted like I wasn't even there. I tried to contribute. I had read the chapter twice, highlighted lines, jotted notes. When I spoke, the others spoke over me. When I suggested a quote for the presentation, one of them rolled their eyes. I felt my throat tighten, but I didn't say anything. Then came the laughter. It started when I dropped my pencil and bent to pick it up. Someone made a joke. Not loud, but loud enough. I didn't catch all of it, but I heard hoodie and talks like that, and I knew. I looked to the teacher. She was right there, sitting at her desk flipping through papers. She didn't look up. Another comment followed. Bet he doesn't even live around here. Still nothing. I felt the heat rise in my ears. I stood up, slower than I meant to. My hands clenched, not in anger, but in shame. Because the worst part wasn't what they said. It was that she let them. After class, I waited until everyone left. "Miss Lane," I said quietly, "did you hear what they said?" She hesitated. "Teenagers joke a lot. Try not to take it personally." Try not to take it personally. Like the ache in my chest was just imagination. Like my voice didn't deserve protection. I walked out without responding, and I didn't speak for the rest of the day. Not in science, not at lunch, not even at home. That night I told Ma what happened. She didn't raise her voice. She just looked tired. Tired like she'd had this conversation before. Too many times. "We fight to be seen," she said. "But sometimes silence is the loudest kind of dismissal." And she was right. The next day, I still went to class. I still did the work. But I also left a note on the teacher's desk. Just 5 words. Silence is never neutral. She didn't say anything about it. But she looked at me longer after that. Chapter 11. Permission to speak. It was poetry week in English, and the assignment was simple. Pick a poem you liked and share a few lines with the class. But I asked for something more. I asked if I could read one of my own. Ms. Lane looked surprised. Not in a bad way, just like she hadn't expected me to ask. "Sure," she said, "if you're comfortable." Comfortable wasn't the word. Terrified was more like it. But I knew this poem. I had written it 100 times in my head before it ever hit the paper. When I stood up at the front of the room, my legs felt like branches in a storm. My hands trembled slightly. But I looked at my classmates, every whisper, every pause, every stare, and then I looked past them. And I began. Amy told me to speak softer, to tuck in my tone and iron my thoughts, to fold my truth like laundry, neat, hidden, forgettable. I read every line like it was the only thing keeping me standing. My voice cracked in the middle, but I didn't stop, not this time. When I finished, the room was quiet. And then someone clapped. Slowly, then more joined in. A few just nodded, but I saw one girl, Ashvin Jaspin, wiping her eyes. After class, a boy I barely knew said, "I didn't know you wrote like that." I said I didn't know I could say it out loud. That day, Miss Lane posted a note on the classroom door. It read, "Your voice belongs here." And for the first time, I believed it might. The next week, she asked if I wanted to share at the school's open mic night. I hesitated. I'd never stood in front of more than 30 kids, and that cafeteria would be full of strangers. Teachers, parents, students from other grades. But I said yes. I spent hours editing my poem, practicing in front of the mirror, rewriting every pause, every breath. The night of the event, the mic felt heavier than I expected. I could hear my own heartbeat through the speakers. But when I opened my mouth, the words came like they'd been waiting their whole lives to be heard. Afterward, a teacher I'd never met told me, that wasn't just a poem, that was a protest. And maybe it was, Or maybe it was just a truth I had finally given myself permission to speak. The next day, 3 younger students approached me in the hallway. One of them whispered, "Can you help me write one too?" Another just said, "Thank you." I started a writing club after school with Miss Lane's help. It began with just 4 of us, then 6, then 10. Stories poured out about fear, pride, silence, and resilience. For the first time, I wasn't the only one in the room holding a pen like a lifeline. By the end of the semester, the library hosted a student showcase. Parents clapped, teachers cried, and voices that had once been buried now echoed through the school. All because of one poem. All because I asked for permission to speak. And someone said yes. Chapter 12. How the lie got passed down. I used to think the world was born the day I entered it, that what I saw was all there ever was. But then Granddad sat me down and handed me a folded newspaper yellowed with time. The headline read, "Peaceful protest turns violent." The date was almost 40 years ago. The photo, a younger version of him, arms raised, eyes fierce. He said, "They told us we were lucky just to be there. In school, in work, in stores, they called it progress. But luck ain't justice, son, and silence ain't peace." I didn't know how much he'd held back until that night. He told me about being sent to the back of the classroom even when he had the answer, about walking miles to school while buses full of empty seats drove past, about his first job where his name was changed on the name tag because Raymond sounded too strong. And every time we swallowed it, he said, they called us polite, respectable, but inside we were screaming. He showed me a scar on his shoulder, said it came from a night he tried to walk home through a neighborhood that didn't want him. They didn't use slurs, he said. They used stares and fists. But the biggest lie, he asked, leaning forward, was when they told us to be grateful. I asked him why he never told me these stories before. "Because I didn't want to break you before the world did," he said. "But now I think you're strong enough to carry the truth." That night, I looked at history books differently. I looked at my school differently. I looked at my own silence differently. Because the lie wasn't just what they said back then. It was what they taught us not to say now. And I wasn't passing that lie on. Not in my name. Chapter 13. Truth with a bruise on its face. Marcus came to school with a swollen lip and a bandage over his cheek. He said he tripped. Everyone pretended to believe him, but I knew the difference between a fall and a fist. We sat next to each other at lunch that day, quiet. He peeled back the wrapper on his sandwich with hands that shook more than he let on. I didn't ask, I just waited. Finally, he said, "They jumped me after practice." I didn't ask who. He didn't say. "But I didn't run," he added. "Not this time." He said it like a badge, like standing still meant something when the world wanted you to shrink. Word got around. Some kids whispered, a few offered nods of respect, others avoided him altogether. Teachers said nothing. At the end of the week, Marcus stood in front of our history class for a presentation. He could have skipped it. No one would have blamed him. But he stood there, with his bruises showing like a second uniform. He read a quote from James Baldwin. "To be a Negro in this country and to be relatively conscious is to be in a rage almost all the time." Then he looked up and added, "And yet, I'm still here, still showing up, still speaking." No one clapped, not because they didn't care, but because some truths don't need applause. They just need space. After class, I told him, "You didn't need to prove anything." He shrugged. "Maybe, but I needed to remind myself I still could." That day, I learned something they don't print in textbooks, that truth doesn't always wear a smile. Sometimes it walks in limping. Sometimes it speaks with a black eye. But it speaks anyway. And when it does, it demands to be heard, not hidden. Chapter 14. A name they try to erase. It started with paint, or rather, the absence of it. There was a mural outside the community center. A bright, powerful piece showing Malik Thompson, our town's first student activist, megaphone in hand, words painted behind him like waves. "They can't silence what we scream together." I passed it every day on my way to school. It made me feel seen, like history wasn't just behind me, but beside me. And then one morning, it was gone, covered in beige paint. A flat, silent color. The wall looked like it had never held anything more than a shadow. A note taped nearby read, "Mural removed for building restoration." But we knew better. Within hours, the photos started circulating, old and new, side by sides. The mural's erasure sparked something. Students whispered in hallways. Teachers gave tight-lipped responses. The town council said it had been a scheduling error. I asked my art teacher what happened. She looked at me and said, "Sometimes they erase because they're afraid of what's still unfinished." That week, I wore Malik's name on my shirt, just handwritten in black marker on a plain white tee. The next day, 5 other students did the same, then 10, then more. We gathered at the wall after school. Someone brought paint, another brought a speaker, and even though we didn't repaint Malik's face, we stood together beneath that blank wall and read his words. Out loud, one by one. When it was my turn, I said, "Erasing a name won't erase what it stood for." And that night someone wrote it back on the wall in chalk. You can paint over a mural, but not a movement. Chapter 15. The day I refused to apologize. It started with a poem. I read it during the morning announcements. It wasn't assigned, it wasn't rehearsed, but it was real. I said, "If my voice makes you uncomfortable, maybe it's because silence made you too comfortable." By third period, the principal had called me to the office. They said I disrupted the tone of the school, that I made students feel targeted, that I should apologize. I asked for telling the truth. They looked at each other like I'd spoken in another language. I sat in that office for 20 minutes while they discussed disciplinary options. I could stay, but only if I issued a written apology. I looked at the paper in front of me, the pen beside it. My hands didn't shake, my throat didn't close. I stood up. "No," I said. I meant every word. They stared at me. "No one was harmed by my poem," I added, "but people have been harmed by pretending things are fine when they're not, so I won't say sorry for saying what needs to be said." I walked out of the office not knowing what would happen next. Maybe detention, maybe a suspension. But when I stepped back into the hallway, 3 students stood waiting. One gave a nod, another gave a fist bump, and the third handed me a folded note. Inside it read, "Thank you for not shrinking." That day, I didn't get detention. But I did start a conversation. And sometimes that's the loudest kind of rebellion.